Hello, and welcome back to User Experience Design, Understanding User Engagement. In Section 2 of this course, we're going to be discussing human-centered design. In this course, what we'll learn is we'll do a little bit of an overview of what we're going to be doing in this section. We're then going to discuss how humans and users are people. And we're going to discuss a little bit about human needs, and then we're just going to continue to get excited and continue our journey. So let's explore how users are real people, how and why user experience cares about users. So when we talk about human-centered design really is equaling that we're really customer first or people first inquiry. Now this is important because there's many ways at which to go about a problem. Sometimes that can go after the machines of the problem, that can go after the system and the business model, the transportation, all the things that go into what is working for how problems occur. But design, since we care about human beings, is really about starting with humans first. Now, user experience really tries to understand users, and we can start by researching and relating what we want to understand. And most of what we want to understand is who our clients are. That could be people or users in a company. That could also just be people on the street that are buying our thing. But there's also the context and the reality at which they engage and operate in the world. Now, human-centered design is part of the larger process that we've been discussing, as in human-centered design, as in design thinking and all this other stuff. So it underpins a lot of this, but the crux of what we'll be discussing is how the beginning of it is really about understanding and using a relationship to understand humans. Now, early in human-centered design, there was a really clever way at which to talk about hear, create, and deliver. And that was really to try and map with the human-centered design output. And it's underpinned by design thinking, but it's really a foundation for starting with what do people want? What is the H of the process? What do people desire? If you can find out what people desire, you might actually know what is viable in the world of business to meet that desire from users. And then if that's actually even possible or technically doable, to deliver that. Now, this cycle of hear, create, deliver is part of a larger design thinking, which is where we get prototyping and all this other stuff involved. But if we really start to concentrate on what we hear from users, that then changes the context of telling people what they need or relating what they do. So if we start with that, the observations at which we build are how we can build context of our users. Now, human-centered design is really interesting because, it can follow this hear, create, deliver. And we start with, like we were discussing in the last section, observations, we can build interviews, we can have stories and outputs, and all of this starts at the beginning. Then can move its way through themes and outputs. But what do humans desire? For UX to understand what we need to spend time with our users. And that might result in us understanding what people think are valuable, what they think are useful, what they think is usable or findable. And part of the values at which we create by spending time with users is that becomes the research of what we're trying to understand. Now, relating this is an output of understanding that UX studies humans, and people and users are not just some nameless, faceless body out in the world. They're actually real people. And sometimes they sit around coffee tables and look at their phones and look at all the stuff that they're doing. But most of the times, this is more for marketing than it is for how people interact. But we've all been at a coffee shop and we see people out with their computers and talking and engaging in work and doing that space. But when we think about users, users is almost a derogatory relationship, right? It doesn't actually, we have to then place a human face onto that person, or onto who that user is. And when we talk about real people, we really want to understand the context of how they feel, what their emotions are, what their behaviors are doing, what their needs and frustrations are. And this can really start relying on it not being about a lot of people, but being about one. And we can focus and concentrate on understanding how users or one user feels and see if that relationship scales across all users and all the outputs. Now, if we can really get at understanding and starting with our users, that can then build out a relationship for them. Now, human-centered design, or sometimes called user-centered design, applies itself into many models of design generally. And this could be for things like design thinking or service design or user experience. Now, these are all just outputs of where we put language around what we're doing when we care about users. Now, user experience design is not the only industry that cares about users or cares about people or cares about output. Most industries have some output at which they care about who they're designing for, what they're making for, whether they're doctors or lawyers or whatever. Like most people engage in an output that is related to service. Now for user experience, the core of that is to really say we can spend a lot of time concentrating on what it means to do that and to care about users, not just as what we do, but we keep it as like a battle cry. That is our role in any institution, is to really start to own and care about what users do. Now, if you start to look at this, the human-centered design process fits inside design thinking or fits in these processes, but we're really trying to understand and find the right problem. And we do this at the beginning by understanding who our users are and starting with them first. And this requires some empathy. Now, we'll get into this a little bit more in the next video, but empathy is the start of human-centered design research. And it's the capacity to understand or feel what another person is experiencing from that person's frame of reference. Now, this means spending time with them, this means being a human being, but it also means relating that we're not just designing for a nameless, faceless entity, we're there to actually solve problems for real people. And if we can put ourselves in their shoes, or we can blur the line between UX designer and user, we will then start to make decisions differently and build things that are much different in our output. Because we spend time observing users, that then allows us to empathize for them, and then it allows us to solve problems that would not be for us as users, or us as UX designers, but it's really for the people that we're designing for. And when we apply UX and human-centered design, and we help find the right solution, it's not just about what is viable or what is doable, but we can also start to understand what is the opportunity, where is the vision in what we think people need. And we can start seeing into what users are asking for and then shifting where things move and what they're actually being responded to. Most businesses are slow to uptake and fix problems. And the reason they are is because their systems are big, or it's very hard, or they're looking at it only through the lens of what their business needs. Now, if you take that and you say, well, we can show you that a number of people will have this issue. Well, that might result in an excellent output for meeting that person's solution. And this can scale. Because if you find that one person has an issue or has a need, that one person might be the same as 700 million other people. Now, the scale at which those things move is what, software company or app or any of these other things are looking to accomplish, because scale allows you to do that. But if you can't solve a problem for one person, there's no way you're going to be able to solve it for 700 million. And this is just what Instagram did in a 7-year period, which is kind of incredible. Now, if we look at what we're trying to kind of get excited about, is that looking at and putting our users first will allow us to learn and get excited for what we're going to design.